What kind of woman seduces her student's father and then kills to keep her secret? What kind of teacher crosses every professional and moral boundary, destroying lives in the process? These are the questions that shook the small town of Riverside, Ohio, when a respected high school teacher's double life was exposed in the most horrific way possible. If you're new to The Only Witness, welcome to our channel where we dive deep into the most shocking true crime cases that reveal the darkness hiding in plain sight. Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe with notifications on, and comment below where you're watching from. Are you joining us from New York, California, Texas, or somewhere else entirely? We love seeing our global audience come together to discuss these incredible cases. Today's story involves betrayal, obsession, and murder in a place where parents send their children to learn and grow. It's about a teacher who was supposed to guide and protect, but instead became a predator and a killer. This is the true story of Sarah Mitchell, the high school English teacher whose secret affair led to cold-blooded murder. Sarah Mitchell was 34 years old when she started teaching at Riverside High School in the fall of 2020. She was beautiful, intelligent, and had the kind of magnetic personality that made both students and parents trust her immediately. Sarah taught advanced placement English and ran the school's drama program, and she was quickly becoming one of the most popular teachers on campus. Sarah had moved to Riverside from Cleveland after a messy divorce that had left her bitter and angry. Her ex-husband had cheated on her with a younger woman, and the betrayal had awakened something dark in Sarah's personality. She felt entitled to happiness, entitled to take what she wanted, regardless of who got hurt in the process. Riverside was the perfect place for Sarah to reinvent herself. It was a small town where everyone knew everyone, where people trusted their neighbors and their children's teachers without question. Sarah quickly became integrated into the community, volunteering for local charities and attending church every Sunday. She was the perfect picture of a dedicated educator and community member. But Sarah Mitchell was hiding a secret that would ultimately lead to murder. In her second semester at Riverside High, Sarah began teaching 17-year-old Marcus Thompson. Marcus was a bright, articulate student who loved literature and dreamed of becoming a writer. He was also dealing with some difficult family issues that made him vulnerable to adult attention and guidance. Marcus's parents, Robert and Linda Thompson, had been having marital problems for months. Robert worked long hours as a construction foreman, and Linda was struggling with depression following the death of her mother. Marcus often felt caught in the middle of their arguments and had begun staying after school to avoid the tension at home. Sarah noticed Marcus's situation and began offering him extra help with his writing. She encouraged his literary ambitions and provided the emotional support he wasn't getting at home. Marcus began to see Sarah as more than just a teacher. She was a mentor, a confidant, someone who truly understood him. But Sarah's interest in Marcus wasn't entirely professional. She was also very interested in Marcus's father, Robert Thompson. Robert was 42 years old, ruggedly handsome and exactly the type of man who attracted Sarah. He was strong, successful, and seemed to have the stability that her ex-husband had lacked. The fact that he was married and had children didn't matter to Sarah. She wanted what she wanted, and she was prepared to do whatever it took to get it. Sarah began reaching out to Robert under the pretense of discussing Marcus's academic progress. She called him regularly with updates about his son's writing, invited him to school events, and gradually inserted herself into the Thompson family life. Robert was initially grateful for Sarah's attention to his son. Marcus had been struggling emotionally, and having a teacher who cared about him seemed like a blessing. Robert began to trust Sarah, to confide in her about his marital problems and his concerns about Marcus. Sarah was an expert manipulator. She listened to Robert's complaints about his wife with sympathy and understanding. She offered advice about dealing with teenagers and slowly positioned herself as the solution to all of Robert's problems. The affair began in March 2021, just 6 months after Sarah had started teaching at Riverside High. Robert had come to the school for a parent-teacher conference, and Sarah had convinced him to stay after hours to discuss Marcus's college applications. One thing led to another, and they ended up having sex in Sarah's empty classroom. For Robert, it was a moment of weakness during a difficult time in his marriage. He felt guilty immediately and tried to end things with Sarah, but Sarah had no intention of letting him go. Sarah became obsessed with Robert Thompson. She convinced him that what they had was real love, that his marriage was dead anyway, and that they deserved to be together. She pressured him to leave his wife, to start a new life with her, to choose her over his family. Robert was torn between his guilt over the affair and his genuine feelings for Sarah. She was everything his wife wasn't: passionate, attentive, exciting. But he also knew that leaving his family would destroy his children and his reputation in the community. The affair continued for months, with Sarah becoming increasingly demanding and possessive. She wanted more of Robert's time, more of his attention, more commitment to their relationship. She began showing up at his construction sites, calling him constantly, and making it clear that she expected him to choose her over his family. By the fall of 2021, Robert realized that Sarah was not the woman he thought she was. She was controlling, manipulative, and completely self-centered. She showed no concern for how their affair was affecting Marcus or the other Thompson children. All she cared about was getting what she wanted. Robert decided to end the affair and try to save his marriage. He told Sarah that what they had was over, that he was committed to working things out with his wife, and that they needed to maintain a strictly professional relationship for Marcus's sake. Sarah Mitchell did not take rejection well. Before we continue with what happened when Sarah's world started falling apart, make sure you're subscribed to The Only Witness and drop a comment letting us know where in the world you're watching from. Are you following this crazy story from Florida, Canada, the UK, or somewhere else? We love connecting with our international audience. Sarah's reaction to Robert's rejection was swift and vicious. If she couldn't have Robert Thompson, she was going to make sure that no one could have him, including his wife. Sarah began stalking the Thompson family with a level of obsession that was truly frightening. She drove by their house at all hours of the day and night. She followed Linda Thompson to the grocery store, to her job at the local bank, to her doctor's appointments. She learned everything about the family's routines and habits. Sarah also began manipulating Marcus in increasingly disturbing ways. She convinced him that his parents didn't understand him, that they were holding him back from his dreams of becoming a writer. She told him that she was the only person who truly believed in his talent, and that he should trust her completely. Marcus, who was still just 17 years old, was completely under Sarah's influence. He began to resent his parents and to see Sarah as his only ally. He had no idea that his beloved teacher was having an affair with his father, or that she was planning something terrible. In December 2021, Robert made a decision that would ultimately cost him his life. He decided to tell Linda about the affair and ask for her forgiveness. He couldn't live with the guilt anymore, and he hoped that being honest would help them rebuild their marriage. Linda was devastated, but willing to work on their relationship. She insisted that Robert cut all contact with Sarah and that they seek marriage counseling. Robert agreed, grateful for his wife's forgiveness and determined to make things right. But Sarah Mitchell was watching the Thompson house on the night that Robert confessed to his wife. She saw the lights on late into the night, saw Robert and Linda talking on their front porch, and somehow knew that her world was about to come crashing down. The next day, Robert called Sarah and told her that his wife knew about the affair and that all contact between them had to stop immediately. "You can't do this to me," Sarah said, her voice deadly calm. "We have something special, Robert. We belong together." "Sarah, it's over. What we did was wrong, and I can't continue hurting my family." "What about Marcus? What about his education, his future? You can continue teaching Marcus professionally, but there can be nothing personal between us anymore. You're making a mistake, Robert. You're throwing away real love for a woman who doesn't appreciate you." "My decision is final, Sarah. Please don't make this harder than it has to be." Sarah hung up the phone and sat in her empty classroom, staring out the window at the parking lot where she and Robert had first kissed. She felt a rage building inside her that was unlike anything she'd ever experienced. Robert Thompson was supposed to be hers. He was supposed to leave his boring wife and start a new life with her. He was supposed to choose her. But if Robert wouldn't choose her willingly, Sarah would make the choice for him. Sarah Mitchell began planning Linda Thompson's murder with the same methodical precision she brought to planning her lesson plans. She studied Linda's routines, learned her schedule, and identified the perfect opportunity to strike. Linda Thompson worked as a loan officer at Riverside Community Bank. Every Tuesday and Thursday, she stayed late to process paperwork, usually until around 7 p.m. when the building was mostly empty. Linda always parked in the same spot in the employee parking lot behind the bank, and she always took the same route home through the quiet, residential streets of Riverside. On Thursday, January 20th, 2022, Sarah Mitchell followed Linda Thompson to work and waited in the parking lot for her to come out. Sarah had borrowed her neighbor's car and was wearing a dark hoodie and baseball cap to disguise her appearance. When Linda came out of the bank at 7:15 p.m., Sarah was waiting for her. "Mrs. Thompson?" Sarah called out, approaching Linda in the dimly lit parking lot. "I'm Sarah Mitchell, Marcus's English teacher. Could I speak with you for a moment?" Linda recognized Sarah's name immediately. This was the teacher Robert had been having an affair with, the woman who had nearly destroyed her marriage. But Linda was a polite woman who tried to see the good in everyone, even those who had hurt her. "Ms. Mitchell, I don't think we have anything to discuss." "Please, Mrs. Thompson, I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. But I need you to understand that what happened between Robert and me was real. We love each other." Linda felt her anger rising. "Ms. Mitchell, my husband ended his relationship with you. You need to respect that decision and stay away from my family." "He didn't end it because he wanted to," Sarah said, stepping closer. "He ended it because you forced him to, because you couldn't stand the thought that he might actually be happy with someone else." "I'm done with this conversation," Linda said, turning toward her car. That's when Sarah pulled out the knife. "You don't get to walk away from me," Sarah said, her voice cold and flat. "You don't get to take Robert away from me and then act like you're the victim here." Linda turned around and saw the weapon in Sarah's hand. She realized immediately that she was in serious danger. "Please, Ms. Mitchell, think about what you're doing. Think about Marcus. How do you think this will affect him?" "Marcus will understand," Sarah said. "Marcus knows that I'm the only person who really cares about him. When you're gone, Robert will realize that I'm the only woman who can make him happy." Linda tried to run, but Sarah was younger and faster. The attack was brutal and swift, fueled by months of obsession and rejection. Linda Thompson died in that parking lot, killed by a woman who had taught her son to analyze Shakespeare and write poetry. Sarah left Linda's body beside her car and drove home, convinced that she had solved all of her problems. With Linda out of the way, Robert would have no choice but to be with her. Marcus would need comfort and support, and Sarah would be there to provide it. Everything would work out exactly as she had planned. But Sarah Mitchell had made one crucial mistake. The bank had security cameras in the parking lot, and they had captured everything. The murder investigation began immediately when Linda's body was discovered the next morning by a bank employee. The security footage clearly showed Sarah approaching Linda and the attack that followed, even though her face was partially obscured by the hood and cap. Detective James Walsh, who was leading the investigation, recognized Sarah immediately. His own daughter had been in her English class the previous year. "I need you to bring in Sarah Mitchell for questioning," he told his partner, "and I need you to do it quietly. We don't want to cause a panic at the school." Sarah was arrested at Riverside High School on Friday afternoon, just as she was finishing her last class of the week. Students and teachers watched in shock as their beloved English teacher was led away in handcuffs. The news of Sarah's arrest sent shockwaves through the community. Parents who had trusted her with their children felt betrayed and violated. Students who had looked up to her felt confused and abandoned. And the Thompson family was left to deal with the devastating reality that their son's teacher had murdered his mother. Marcus Thompson was particularly traumatized by the revelation. The teacher he had trusted and admired, the woman who had encouraged his dreams and made him feel special, had killed his mother in cold blood. The betrayal was so complete and devastating that Marcus suffered a complete nervous breakdown and had to be hospitalized. Robert Thompson was consumed with guilt. If he had never started the affair with Sarah, his wife would still be alive. If he had handled the situation differently, if he had been stronger, if he had seen the warning signs of Sarah's obsession, there were 1,000 what-ifs that tormented him every day. The trial of Sarah Mitchell began 6 months later and became one of the most closely watched cases in Ohio history. The prosecution painted Sarah as a cold-blooded killer who had murdered an innocent woman out of jealousy and obsession. The defense tried to argue that Sarah had been suffering from a mental breakdown, that the stress of the divorce, the affair, and Robert's rejection had caused a temporary psychotic episode. But the evidence of premeditation was overwhelming. The borrowed car, the disguise, the weapon, the methodical planning. Sarah's behavior during the trial was particularly disturbing. She showed no remorse for Linda's death and continued to insist that she and Robert belonged together. She seemed genuinely convinced that once Robert got over his grief, he would realize that she had done him a favor by removing his wife from the picture. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning a verdict of guilty on all charges. Sarah Mitchell was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As we wrap up this disturbing story of obsession and murder, let us know in the comments where you're watching from and what you think about teachers who abuse their positions of trust. Are you following from Australia, Germany, Brazil, or somewhere else? We love hearing from our viewers around the world. The Sarah Mitchell case had lasting impacts that extended far beyond the courtroom. Riverside High School implemented new policies regarding teacher-parent interactions and mandatory training on professional boundaries. The Thompson family moved away from Riverside, unable to continue living in the community where Linda had been murdered. Marcus Thompson eventually recovered from his breakdown, but the experience left permanent scars. He gave up his dreams of becoming a writer, saying that words had been forever tainted for him by his association with Sarah Mitchell. He became an advocate for victims of educator abuse and worked to help other students who had been betrayed by trusted adults. Robert Thompson never remarried. He devoted himself to raising his children and carrying on Linda's memory. He blamed himself for his wife's death until the day he died, never able to forgive himself for the affair that had set the tragic events in motion. Sarah Mitchell remains in prison, still maintaining her innocence and insisting that Linda Thompson's death was justified. She has never shown any remorse or understanding of the lives she destroyed through her selfish obsession. This case serves as a stark reminder that predators can hide anywhere, even in our schools and trusted institutions. It shows how quickly obsession can turn deadly and how devastating the consequences can be when adults in positions of authority abuse the trust placed in them. The story of Sarah Mitchell is ultimately about the dangers of unchecked obsession and the tragic consequences that follow when someone believes they are entitled to whatever they want, regardless of who gets hurt. It's about the importance of recognizing warning signs and the need for strong professional boundaries in all relationships involving power imbalances. If this story has affected you, please remember that there are resources available for anyone dealing with stalking, harassment, or abuse. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is available 24/7 at 1-800-799-7233. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to The Only Witness for more deep dives into America's most shocking true crime cases. Drop a comment below, letting us know where you're watching from. We love connecting with our audience from all around the globe. Until next time, this has been The Only Witness, reminding you that sometimes the greatest dangers come from those we trust most. Stay safe out there, and remember to always trust your instincts when something doesn't feel right. These stories aren't easy to tell or hear, but they're important because they help us understand the warning signs of dangerous behavior and remind us to protect the vulnerable people in our communities. Thank you for joining us on this difficult journey through one of the most disturbing cases of educator abuse and murder we've ever covered. We'll see you next week for another shocking true crime story. This is The Only Witness signing off.